Welcome to Terrible Lizards, a podcast about dinosaurs with Dr. David Hone and Izzy Lawrence. On this episode, we talk fandoms. Why is it that some people treat dinosaurs as though they're fictional? And we have a special guest to help us.
Hello everybody and welcome to Terrible Lizards. This is the second series of, second episode of series 11? Numbers is hard, yes. That there you heard over there on the internet was magnificent, my co-host extraordinaire, expert in all things dinosaur and flappy flap pterosaur. It is Dr. Dave Hone from Queen Mary University. There he is, yay!
Hello again. I'm not sure you need to introduce me every time at this rate. People should know who I am by now, but yes, thank you.
This may be the first episode that they've clicked on. They might be fans of our guest. You never know, it might be his mum. Who knows? So, will you please... will you show me how an introduction should be done, Dave?
Yeah, but people don't know who he is. Whereas in theory, the listeners know who I am. Anyway, today we have Dr. Michael O'Sullivan. He's probably been mentioned at some point in the past a couple of times. So Mike did his PhD alongside Darren Naish and Mark Whitten, who people definitely have heard of and has been mentioned a couple of times down in Portsmouth on British pterosaurs. And so I've known Mike for, I'm thinking 15 years, probably getting on for more like 20 at this point. He's nodding vaguely in the background. But yeah, we're not talking about pterosaurs today, or at least we're not intending to talk about pterosaurs today. They may come up. But I wanted to get him on because it's kind of, I think, feeds in from last month's episode where I talked about outreach and communication and how people kind of treat that. Because I've been chatting to Mike for a couple of years now on and off about kind of like the paleo fandom. So not necessarily people like a lot of our audience who have a kind of understanding or like are really interested in the science and are really interested in what's going on and what it means. But more people who kind of like dinosaurs, which isn't quite the same thing. And I suspect a lot of our normal listeners really don't realize that actually there's this kind of entire second world of fans of dinosaurs out there. And that's sort of what Mike and I have been talking about. And I know something he's really interested in. And therefore, here he is, Dr. Michael O'Sullivan.
Hello. No one should know who I am. No one should know who I am.
You be keeping it quiet.
Well, they will now. There'll be at least 7 people.
Oh, no, I have something to shill later. Don't worry. I'll shill later.
Okay, excellent. Now, before recording, you decided to call a particular extinct animal something, and I just want you to repeat it because I just want to hear Dave's pain again. Because I call pterosaurs flappy flaps.
My PhD was very specifically in the taxonomic diversity of British flappydactyls.
Yes!
So
yes, I'm going to call it. I don't care what this episode is actually going to end up being based on. Flappydactyls is what I will definitely call this episode.
I'm trying to remember if it was Mark Whitten or Dave Martill who started that. One of them did, and I've never let it die.
It's beautiful.
I suspect, quite seriously, I suspect Dave Unwin kind of started it because in his pterosaur book, was it Pterosaurs of Deep Time, Dragons of Deep Time, something like that. He called hatchling pterosaurs that could fly, he called them flaplings, which is a term I despise and is very much not caught on in the pterosaur literature. Much like we talk about Pagamizer, where everyone goes like, oh, that's the real term. It's like 2 people use it and everyone else hates it. Flapling has not set its way into the scientific literature of pterosaur. But I suspect he started that flappy thing. And given his and Martill's close relationship, that's probably where that came from.
Yeah, I could believe that. I do pterosaur taxonomy, and I'm currently working as a teacher, but I'm getting back into my research. I keep scheduling my research to go, and then I remember I'm doing exams. So, but I have had an interest in this concept of paleo fandom for really hit me about 3 years ago. Oddly enough, as I felt I left it, as I became more of an outsider of it. And both the positives and negatives, like there's some really good things in it and there's some really bad things in it because it's a fandom and the psychology of fandom is such a unique thing. But as I became less involved in fandom, I decided I wanted to learn more about it, weirdly enough.
So where do we want to go with this? Because, there's a lot of I actually did a whole episode on fandoms for the BBC World Service. I do a documentary there called The Forum. And we've very much focused on K-pop. in that one, which has a nuts fandom, which I think all dinosaur lovers can just feel a bit more relaxed that we don't have like Spinosaur
we're not like
idols.
K-pop, yeah.
It has its moments.
Yeah. It does.
Be careful of your Amazon book searches.
Okay.
That's all I'll say about that.
Yeah, I have seen that stuff. I have not read that stuff.
I had to buy someone that as a birthday gift last year because they asked for it.
Right. I was going to say, when you say had to, okay, they asked. Fair enough. I think where you probably need to start is actually give people a little bit of sense of what this is like. Because as I said, I'm not trying to set up a division of like us versus them, but I think there are obviously people who overlap massively. But I think you can broadly say there are people who are more into the science, so who are listening to podcasts like this, who are following people like Darren O'Shell, Mark Whitten, or Natalia Jackie Elsker on Facebook, or I was about to say Twitter, but now everyone's looking at Twitter, on Blue Sky, and like want to know and discuss and chat and learn. And then there, I think, probably the side of it more that we're talking about is the kind of like dinosaurs are cool. And it's not that we don't think dinosaurs are cool, but we maybe think there's a bit more to them than that.
Yeah, it's an interesting division. So how I would describe it, just for a bit of context, like I am very much coming at this as someone who has been in fandom since I was a kid. I am a massive nerd. I've got like a Godzilla over there. I've got a Transformer made out of 3 dinosaurs on my shelf. It's a Giganotosaurus, a Quetzalcoatlus, and an Elasmosaurus. And they're all just merged into each other. And what else I've got? I've got a Carnotaurus barbarian humanoid action figure. So I am a massive nerd. It's amazing. You should get it. It's so good. But when you look at paleontology, it's almost unique. It's not quite unique, but it's almost unique in that it has a very large vocal group of non-experts deeply obsessed with it, deeply connected to it. Weirdly enough, I think one of the only other sciences that has that on a lesser level is zoology. And I think that's actually a lot of overlap. And when you talk fandom, you're talking like they watch the movies, they obsess over the culture, they have meetups, there's the dinosaur toy blog. Like you got everything. Like Walking with Dinosaurs is having like full on legacy media nostalgia kicks right now. And it's really interesting to look at it, but it also is very strange in a way because you have a lot of non-experts who absorb the culture and then try to get involved under the expert level and try to communicate on the expert level. And again, like not digging at anyone about like their ability to whether many amateur paleontologists are frankly better than me. But you're talking about like the news article goes up about a new species being discovered and it changing taxonomy of like the Allosaurus anax, is that it?
Yep.
The Saurophaganax was supposed to be this big theropod, and then they re-looked at the material and they broke it up, and now it's like a larger Allosaurus and an indeterminate sauropod, because I think Snowman Dubin, isn't it? They haven't actually like re-diagnosed it.
Yeah, so all the diagnostic characters were on the sauropod referred elements. So yeah, the taxonomy of that is complicated anyway. We vaguely covered this, so I think we covered it in the Christmas questions episode.
Yeah, and the mega.
So at least some of our listeners will have a bit of background on this. But anyway, so that's the setup, Saurophaganax, yeah. And then what happened?
But like you in about over a period of like 2 weeks, a month, you had some fascinating like YouTubers suddenly started doing like clickbait thumbnails about Saurophaganax destroyed, Saurophaganax myth or mistake or something like that. I saw one which was like a dragon with the word Saurophaganax over it that was clearly AI generated. People started fighting about it online. You started getting memes. People started saying like, "Oh, is Saurophaganax real? Is Saurophaganax not real?" You had people started having a go at the authors because people like the animal, and it's like a superhero. It's genuine. It's like people like someone's like, Superman is now going to join a political party. Oh no, we can't have that. That's my favorite character. You can't make him do that. It's the same thing. Like, no, this is my favorite dinosaur. What are you doing?
I've definitely seen stuff around that, and as you say, like people. And again, we're trying to be careful here because we're not trying to have a go at people, but this is the sort of thing that can happen. So even when the paper came out, it made it pretty clear that there's something big. You know, there is a very large allosaur We just now don't think it's probably different enough to warrant it having a separate name. As in, it's not Saurophaganax, it's Allosaurus, but it's still a different, separate, bigger species of Allosaurus. And yet people were like, as you say, like very upset that this had happened. And it's like, at some level, nothing has changed. I saw some people posting like, oh, this is a real game changer for our understanding. And it's like, even with all respect to the authors, many of those whom are friends to mine, the day before that paper came out, there was a giant allosaur in the Morrison Formation with a different name. And the day after that paper came out, there was a giant allosaur known from the Morrison Formation with this different name. Actually, it's not a game changer at all. It's in an incredibly minor shade of grey shuffling, because most of that reconstruction is still based on the material that we still have. There's still arms and bits of legs and other stuff from the same animal from the same quarry. It really hasn't changed anything at all. And so, as you say, for people to completely throw up in arms, and this is just an example of how that all kind of goes. Again, without being too disrespectful, it shows they really don't understand what they think they understand, and then are very, very upset about it, where, Dan Chury, who's largely responsible for naming it and doing most of the work on it, his response was kind of like, yeah, probably. Like the guy who's had his work just like basically publicly shredded and said, you really screwed this up. You didn't realize these were sauropods, that your description's wrong, your analysis is wrong. It's kind of like, yeah, it's a fair cop. That's unfortunate. We all make mistakes. But hey, the record's corrected, science is moving on. And, I'd be very upset if someone did that to my research. But I wouldn't be half as upset as these people are. And that is what you kind of find fascinating.
Isn't it also this case, which is in all fandoms and in all interactions online, is it tends to be people sound more extreme in short little Reddit posts than they do in reality. And so we have this sort of idea that things get a lot more serious and a lot more passionate just because we're only reading text.
Exactly. Like you're getting snippets out of people's minds. Like you try, the amount of times I've tried to say something online and people go like, "What do you mean by that?" And it's like, "No, I didn't mean it." And like, I didn't have text. I had a X number of character limit. I couldn't say anything more. But and like you see something else, like you said like the quick snippets. Another thing that leaks into paleontology fandom, and it's very strange to me that it does, is the power scaling concept. Have you heard of that?
Yeah.
Like there is a thing.
I mean, explain to me the power scaling.
Let's start with
context,
that.
Mike. There we go.
Who would win in a fight, Godzilla or Superman? By the way, it's happened, and Godzilla won. But I've got the comic on my. I'll show it to you later if you want to see. But who would win in a fight, Godzilla or Superman? Oh, well, Godzilla can lift X amount of tons. Well, Superman is multi-universal. Well, Godzilla can surpass time and space and Jesus or whatever. Like, it's like people who try to apply the formulae behind this is insane. There is like several websites which give detailed calculations of like how hard Superman punched that time he moved the Earth. Or that time he held the universe together with his thoughts or something. Like, it is insane. And then, so like, they get so passionate. People who are into this are so passionate about it. And like, there's YouTube series on this and there's arguments, and it's insane. I've never gotten into it. I just like, writers write what they want to write. Things happen. But they apply it to animals. So there is a YouTube channel, which is like basically a nature versus channel, like a lion versus a bear, who would win. Like the most recent one I saw was Triceratops versus Palaeoloxodon, not even close, which is a big elephant versus a big dinosaur, not even close. And like the not even close thing is a very common clickbait thing to get people like, oh, X Hulk versus Superman, not even close, or something like that.
Right, because if it's one of them wins so easily, it's...
Yeah. And then you get the psychology of fans arguing over a comic book brought into fans arguing over real life animals. Like, I actually saw really good,
real science. I mean, that's
and real
the
science.
Thing. It's not. It's not just so. The comic one is perfect. I know I've sent this to you, and I think I may have even mentioned it on a previous episode when we'd been talking about this stuff. I literally saw a Reddit thread where it wasn't Saurophaganax. It was one of those kinds of things, like one of these revision papers, like was going to say messing around with, changing the taxonomy of something. And the response from a comment was, so is this name canon now? And they use the word canon, which for those who don't know is when you're talking about something like Star Wars, like we've got the movies, but there's also millions of comics and millions of books and millions of computer games.
The Christmas special.
The Star Wars holiday special and things like that. Like
it did happen. It did happen.
Yeah, I know. So as Mike was saying, like when these things conflict, like, oh, they said Luke couldn't do this special power, but now he can. How do we know what's true? The idea is like there is set stuff that is canon, and it's usually like the films or like the central stuff of whatever it was, and the other stuff is just kind of fluff and maybe don't worry about it too much. And okay, this is just like a single post, but again, that concept that someone accidentally or deliberately, or I suspect deliberately, like thinks there is a rule for what should or shouldn't be science and what should or shouldn't be accepted is clearly coming directly from, the movie and comic like background of what should and shouldn't be considered real or accepted. And that is, I think, problematic.
It's such a strange concept in a science, which like, especially science like paleontology, where like, in the last, 5 years, we've had Tyrannosaurus Rex, then we had 4 Tyrannosaurs, then a week later we're back to Tyrannosaurus Rex, and now we've got 2 Tyrannosaurs. And it's like...
we went to 3. We went to 3. We went from 1 to 3 to 1, and now to 2.
It was Rex, Regina, and something else, wasn't it?
Imperator.
And then back onto Rex, now we've got Macraensis into it all. And that is just normal. Taxonomy shifts and change constantly. Triceratops was once 20 different species. It was brought down to 2. There's arguments about some of the other ceratopsians, whether they could be synonymized with Triceratops or if some Triceratops mespins could be synonymized with something else and blah, blah. Taxonomy changes. Our understanding of them changes. Our understanding of their physical appearance, behavior. It's constantly evolving. There is no canon. The canon is reality. It happened. We're just learning what happened. And the idea that is Thorophagoness canon, or is some big theropod canon, or is some dinosaur canon? It's just like, no one's writing a comic about this that's going to contradict your movie that you have to ignore when the director doesn't read the comic, But
it is very upsetting. I mean, I'm still not over the fact that the Ornithischian dinosaurs are not... I mean, the Arve dinosaurs are not in with the Ornithischians from a very logical standpoint, that bird-hipped dinosaurs do not include birds. It annoys us, who I am a fan of dinosaurs. I don't do any science involving dinosaurs, and it's just incredibly irritating. So, I sympathise greatly with the idea that, can we just sort this? Can we just get one thing straight now, please? Can that be canon? That I understand the impulse.
Oh, I would love I would love it. Or just like there is a paleontological canon. This is this, but it's just like I always say like you're looking at like individual photographs of the worst day of an animal's life.
Yeah.
Like you're not going to get usually. Yeah, you're not going to get like much of a story. You're getting like such short segments of their existence. Like it's always transitioning, and like it's what I love about it. To be honest, it's one of the things I absolutely adore about this science. Like it like almost no other. It's just like it's constantly shifting because of the little more snapshots coming in.
Well, it's that not very famous quote which I once dug into, so I can't remember who it's attributed to, but once I looked it up, it turns out it's almost certainly a false attribution and no one actually really knows where it came from. But it's supposedly either a speech or a conversation in the House of Commons, and this is in like the 17 or 1800s, with an argument over something. And it says like, well, you've changed your position. You said this and now you're saying this. And the famous response is, well, when the facts change, my opinions change with it. What are you doing? Which is really relevant because, we'd only ever dug up an animal this big before. Now we've dug up a bigger one. Therefore, by definition, they could have got bigger. We've just found a bigger one. Or we did, I was actually writing a bit about Dinosaurus this morning. Dinosaurus was just this pair of arms forever and a day.
Oh, God,
and they were huge theropod arms. And it was like, oh, well, it's this weird giant mystery predator because they're absolutely enormous arms. And they've got at least some things in common with like T-Rex because it turned out ultimately it's an ornithomimosaur. They're pretty close to tyrannosaurs, so not surprised their arms are pretty similar. And then, okay, a few people have said, actually, this is probably an ornithomimosaur, but really we didn't know. And then found the rest of it, and lo and behold, it's this big, weird, maybe kind of wading, fat, slow, not like other ornithomimosaur animals. And it's like, well, that's the facts changing. We literally have data and evidence that we didn't have 6 months ago. Well, whenever it came out 6 months ago, or let alone 50 years ago. So, yet, of course, we change our position according to the data. But the idea that there's this, and again, that's the other thing which has come up a bit, I think, that every new paper is right. It's like, what's the latest paper? This paper is out today and it says this. So we now all need to believe this being true. And so you saw that a bit with the three species of T-Rex. And okay, the media doesn't help in that context, but literally people were like celebrating the fact that we've now got these extra species and wow, what does it mean? And da-da-da-da-da. And of course, as you say, and of course I was part of that team, within a couple of months, we had a paper out going, I really don't think so. But even if we hadn't published that paper, there is lots of stuff that does get published, which like no one buys, but really no one can be bothered to respond to because it's such a minor thing. And yet that lives on with those people who go, well, as long as no one's contradicted it, it's the best answer or the only answer, or it's what we think is going on. And again, I think that's not a helpful way of looking at things. And I think that also goes back to what I was saying to Izzy just before we started recording. One of the things I find odd about this side of things is their kind of absolute fixation isn't necessarily the quite the right word. They're really using science. So these people are clearly keeping up with it to a certain degree. Otherwise, they wouldn't be going, hey, look at this new paper. Hey, look at this new study. Hey, have you seen the news that X, Y, or whatever has come out, whether it's a talk or a conference abstract or whatever. And yet really, really don't actually seem to engage with it in terms of like the actual underlying science. I mean, I've even seen people go off on one, not even necessarily from a misleading like paper. Oh, here's a good example, the feathered T-Rex stuff. So when that paper came out, is it 5-6 years ago now, saying, actually, we've looked at all these bits of scales or scale impressions and traces from all these different tyrannosaurs in Mongolia and Canada and the US, and we don't think there's good evidence for feathers in tyrannosaurs. Everyone was going off on, it's now featherless, scales all the way, no feathers, any of your old descriptions are wrong, emphasis on wrong, 6 exclamation marks, etc. And then you read the paper, and the paper itself says, we're not ruling out feathers. We've only got a few bits of skin here. There are bits of the body completely unrepresented. We know there are preservation issues. And then I pointed this out to people and was shouted down. And it's like, but this is the paper you're quoting as your source for why feathers are wrong. And it doesn't say that. And so it does show that they're far more, as you say, like that comic book or that movie fandom thing of they're far more obsessed with what they think it is than what it actually is. But it's kind of weird because, again, like this is almost like I would say, you watch, I'm just picking on Star Wars, I'm not trying to, but like you watch Star Wars and see a scene and go, that's happening, so that's the thing, and then literally ignoring the next scene where the same film that is the thing that you're claiming is canon then goes, aha, but that wasn't true. That was just a dream, or that's what could happen. And it's like, you do realize in the film itself, they actually said that's a dream. It's not real. And it's not a director's cut or an extended edition or a scene that was never released or was in the script but didn't make it. Like, this is literally the thing that you're arguing about says that, but you're not actually apparently interested in it. only what it kind of does for you, and I do find that very odd.
So for a while now, I've been thinking, why does paleontology create this environment? Why does it create this fandom culture? And I think one big thing is that, okay, someone's going to shoot me for saying this, but dinosaurs are dragons. Dinosaurs are conceptual animals. They don't exist anymore. As far as the average everyday person feels, a Tyrannosaurus is no more a part of their life than Smaug. And they are introduced to these creatures through media. They are introduced to these creatures through movies, games, cartoons, comics, books, whatever. And it's always like the director's version of it, the author's version of it. Was it a friendly velociraptor? Was it a monstrous, was it a sharp dude? Was it Rexy? Was it the Indominus Rex? Was it whatever they've got in Ark? But you've got these creatures that are fictionalized. They're given very strong individual characters often. They're friendly, they're horrors, they're villains, they're heroes. And as the people who are more likely to be involved in fandom grow up, they are very much engaging with these animals as part of their childhood nostalgia of, I love my superheroes, I love my monster movies, I love my dinosaurs. And it brings that psychology with it. And for the people who don't go into professional, and not, again, this is very much not all fandoms. There are many, many positives about paleo fandom as well. But for once you get into this kind of dialogue, they never get into a situation where they have to rethink that it's part of my childhood nostalgia nerd fandom. And so these real animals and this real science that is constantly evolving and constantly getting stuff wrong and constantly contradicting itself is put into the same mind space of, I watched Zack Snyder's Justice League, I think there should be a Snyderverse. I think there should be a Paleoverse. But so I really think it's very much tied into how we get into it. Like, I got into it the same. I was introduced to dinosaurs through Land Before Time, and I decided I was going to study being a paleontologist when I saw Jurassic Park. I have a whole story about how I saw Jurassic Park, which my father's a weird guy. Where he told me I was going to buy shoelaces. And we were going to buy shoelaces in 1993, and we had to drive into Limerick City, which was 40 minutes away, for very special shoelaces. And I was 7 and dumb. But, I'll remember that until the day I die. But, you're talking about something that was such a core part of my childhood memory of going to a cinema with my father. It's become a huge part of my adult life. Even like I said, I'm not working as professional as I used to because I moved into secondary school teaching, but I'm still so deeply ingrained in this.
So dinosaurs aren't part of although they were animals and there obviously is a science behind them. For most people, it's just part of the cultural imagination of society, and to have everything within that cultural imagination match, therefore, is very important to sort of define who we are as people rather than what dinosaurs were actually like.
I think so.
So where I was going with that, which I think echoes both of your points, is while Mike was talking, I was thinking back to the Michael Bay Transformers films. So
why would you do this to me? Why would you do this to me?
But this, right? We'll get there. So for people who don't know, because I do know we have some young listeners. So there was an original Transformers cartoon in the early mid 80s,
1984.
Right. Okay. That I certainly saw as a kid, and I wasn't like a massive obsessive, but I did really love it. I had a few Transformers toys, only a handful. But when the Michael Bay Transformers film came out, I, like many people of my age, were horrified because they didn't look and they didn't act, and the whole tone of the thing was so completely different to what I grew up with and what I liked. And it's well, that's why I liked them, or at least that's what I attached that to. And so I really didn't like that thing before it even started because it didn't look right and it didn't feel right. And that's where I'm heading with this point, is that because paleontology advances so quickly, and then you see that exact thing, or you see it a lot at the moment. I know you will have done, but other people have already done. There's currently a big dinosaurs were cooler without feathers. And it's a shame. They don't necessarily hate the feathers or think the feathers are wrong, but they don't like that it's happened because that's not what my dinosaurs are. And again, however much I loathe the Michael Bay Transformers films, they are a separate entity because they're not based on anything. So, sadly, there is no historical record of the Transformers. They did not crash to Earth several million years ago, and we've been dealing with them ever since. This isn't that. It's in the same way that, obviously, movies about historical events take liberties and some take massive liberty.
Gladiator with its sharks in the arena.
Well, right. But like, D-Day happened. There were cases like Private Ryan where a whole family was wiped out and they made special effort to recover the last member of that family because it was very bad PR if all 4 or 5 or 6 sons got wiped out at once. So those things absolutely happened. But like, Transformers didn't. But also, dinosaurs did. So you can't, all right, you can obviously have a preference. If you like scaly dinosaurs and you think scaly Velociraptor is cool or better, knock yourself out. But it wasn't. And that, like, jarring between, I think, like, the nostalgia and fondness and growing up with somethingness is what's clashing with the reality of stuff changing. And that's probably then why people get so upset, because it's like, remember your childhood hero? Turns out he wasn't very nice, or turns out he wasn't like that. It's that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I was just thinking about it, like you said, the feathers. Did you see the edit that came out there on Blue Sky and Twitter and Facebook of someone had edited out the Jurassic Park raptors and edited more like they're still like giant size and everything else, but they're like fully feathered, they're moving right and everything else. And reading through the comments of that was fascinating, because it is like two completely polar opposite opinions of, this is the best thing, this movie is the worst movie because it wasn't up to date to the science we have now. And these are the worst
30 years ago.
Yeah, these are the worst things ever. Oh no, they're going to do the T-Rex next. And it's just like, it just like when you were saying that about the feathers, just like that really hit me.
But why is it that these debates do go so toxic? Is it just because it doesn't really explain? I mean, we can have differences about things. Why does it? I mean, and we've talked a little bit about the fact that it's the internet and the fact that everything's condensed. But, it isn't a nice discussion going, well, actually, I like to think of, as I do, T-Rex as white with blue spots. I'm not hurting anybody with that, idea, Dave. It doesn't hurt anyone. It might not be science. We've got no evidence. But, why not do that? Why does it get so, I wouldn't say dangerous, but, it gets nasty.
Like, you said color there, like this, a couple of years ago, I was chatting to Dave about color and like art and stuff like that. And I just don't like how many dinosaurs are based on real birds in terms of coloration and stuff like that. Like direct 1-to-1 lift off. Like, you see, like in TV and stuff like that, we've seen bald eagles being used for velociraptors or dromaeosaurs, or it was Axillobator then, or whatever it was in Prehistoric Planet. I don't remember which big dromaeosaur it was. But you've got like pigeons were being used for Therizinosaurus in one of Mark Whitten's art pieces and stuff like that. And like Mark is phenomenal, like one of the top paleo artists in the world. And I looked at it and just like, I just don't like it. I don't like how it's just like basically it's not giving me the animal's identity, it's giving me the bird's identity. Or like if you look at the beast of the Mesozoic Ceratopsian line, the color scheme drives me up the wall because it's all based off lizards. And I'm like, they're not lizards. And they didn't live like lizards. They probably didn't look like lizards in terms of color. But I was saying that to Dave, and someone went for both of us. And I mean went.
Yeah.
Like, they went on a really aggressive, like, actually, I've been drawing art for years. Actually, this is fine. If you do what you're talking about, you'd... And I was really, like, a little like, hang on, I was literally just saying, I don't like that. It's a personal opinion. I'm still trying to figure that one out. Like, Dave, what do you think?
It's hard to say. Again, I can only look back to it being what I was saying before about, like, you're challenging effectively people's self-identity by accident or design. And that point you made about, like, the Saurophaganax paper where, yes, some people are going after the authors, and fortunately not in a particularly bad way. It's not like, to my knowledge, at least anyone was getting, like, actual threats or anything like this. But the very fact that people were writing posts and comments and tweets kind of going, this is awful, these people are wrong, they've done it badly. And that's another thing that you see a lot, within minutes of papers coming out, people are like, oh, well, it's obviously wrong. I saw a thread on Reddit. I keep bringing Reddit up because it's one of the few things I actually hang around that has something like this. But it was like within minutes of the paper, someone had gone, well, it's obviously all wrong. If you ask around, people who've seen this know that it's full of holes. It's a very poor piece of work. And you're like, it's been out minutes. You couldn't possibly have had time to read this. And speaking as someone who is a theropod worker, who at least knows a tiny bit about sauropods, and has spoken to a bunch of Morrison people, including, again, I didn't speak to him, but like Dan Shuri was leaving comments on Facebook talking about it. Like, the general consensus is this is fine from the researcher community. So, I suspect this comment was obviously just basically made up. But if you have been speaking to a bunch of people about this who've told you it's terrible work, probably none of them are Jurassic theropod workers, because I know all of them, and none of them have said a bad word against it. Partly because even if you do hate it, you're too polite and you're not just going to slag it off online within the first 5 minutes. And partly because it takes time to think about this stuff. I think that's a sliding slightly sideways, but a very common thing I think you get with a lot of media coverage of new papers, because I've certainly had this, is a journalist sends me a paper and goes, this paper's coming out like tomorrow or in a few hours. Can you have a read and tell me what you think? And of course, I don't have time to read this paper in full and go through the nuances of it. And then they want a comment. And so, of course, you suddenly end up doing something fairly generic like, well, it's a very interesting study and hopefully we'll learn something from it, because I haven't had time to find out whether or not it's any good. And if it was terrible, even if it's someone I don't particularly fan of their work, but doubly so if it's a friend or a colleague, I don't really want to go, this is terrible and shouldn't have been published. So all the comments are generally very, very run of the mill. But yeah, going back on topic, I think it is that thing of like you're challenging, people's nostalgia. What you thought is probably wrong, and that's a challenge to your identity and how you want things to be. And of course, we know from Flat Earth and so many other things, convincing people they're wrong about something just responds in them gripping hold of it all the tighter and rejecting it further. But again, it's a weirdly anti-scientific position to take when what you're claiming is you're a fan of science.
Well, it's an anti-academic position to take. I mean, if you look at what happened to the National Trust when they dared to acknowledge that all the money from these really nice stately homes actually comes from the slave trade, they got in huge trouble for just mentioning the real history. If you have a look at American sites, where they, have George Washington's Mount Vernon, and literally there's just no mention of slavery at all. And you're just like, that's his whole thing. That's why he was fighting this, war against the, England, was to make sure he could keep his slaves. Anyway, point is, why do these subjects become so personal to people? Is it just because we're foisted, like dinosaurs are foisted on us as children? I mean, maybe if we sort of waited till we were all 18 and then we could be like, oh, I see, there were dinosaurs. Interesting. Maybe that's a way forward.
I have an idea in this, and I think it's because a lot of people into dinosaurs are also into very nerdy things that also make you feel isolated growing up. I'm talking about this from experience. Like, the reason the Transformers thing, and he knows about this, made me roll my eyes is because I am a long time hardcore Transformers fan. Again, triple to dinosaur Transformer literally within arm's reach. But I've read all the comics. I know a lot of the comic writers, a lot of the comic artists. I've watched all the TV shows. I've seen all the movies. Most of them are terrible. 2 of them are good. So I am very deep in this, and I was that kid in 2007 going like, this is the worst. This is a crime against everything I care about. But when you grow up with nerd culture, you are often isolated because of it. Like, I was isolated because of my interests. Like, I was into cartoons, I was into dinosaurs, I was into comics, I was into sci-fi movies and fantasy and all that. And rural Ireland, those tend not to go down if you're not kicking a ball afterwards. And I wasn't, because I wanted to watch, I was missing my shows. They're not just interests. Like, when you're in a fandom, it is part of your core identity. And something portrayed in that fandom in a way that is against that core identity. Like, even if, if a good example, it's a rather sad example, to be honest, there was a show called Steven Universe, and it was a huge cartoon, like one of the most popular of all time, considered revolutionary. And they had main characters, and they were what was it? There were rocks, sentient rocks, and they were there was reds and blues and everything else. And a young girl on Tumblr, back when it was relevant, she drew a character that looked like her, but she was of herself. She redid the character so they looked more like her, because she said she loved this character. She just wanted to feel like she was being seen in it. And she was of a different race than what people, not what the character was, what people read the character as. Because the character was red, like literally red. But her design, like overall design look, was meant to more in vogue African-American culture. It's like her hairstyle and everything else. And I don't remember like if the person was Caucasian or what, but she got viciously attacked online. And I mean, she got the worst kind of thing you can, and she very, very sadly attempted suicide. And the day it became public that she attempted suicide, most of the replies were good.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because she had attacked something core to people's identity. People had that character had become a representation for like their personal view, their own race, their own, like maybe they felt like finally I'm being represented more on TV or something like that. And this person, on a very personal level, in their view, it was a form of cultural appropriation, and she deserved what she got. And I think when you have something that's not just an interest, but has become a formative part of your life in a time when you were probably pretty vulnerable, and probably by liking it, you suffered, and then you had to defend it more. No, I'm not wrong for liking this. You're wrong. And many people, and again, 2007, I'm not innocent from this. When they are faced with with something that literally says like, actually, this is something completely different to what you wanted or what you love. Like, it can be really personal, and it can lead to this is one thing I didn't do. I didn't go after anyone online. I did once have a very odd conversation at a convention at 2:00 in the morning, but they're all odd at that time of day. But when something is so ingrained in your not just your interest, but your soul and your safety blanket almost, this is your comfort zone, and something is presented in front of you that's different, it can bring out the worst in some people. And sometimes the worst in some people is sending death threats or screaming at an author you don't know what you're talking about, despite the fact they wrote the paper. Or having a go at people because they said they don't like the color of your dinosaur art because it looks a bit too much like an eagle.
Slightly sideways to that, but again, still related. And thinking about that, like fandom and canon and right and wrong thing, do you think there's something in the issue that, for us at least, it tends to be very plastic? I mean, I know you said there was a result in the Godzilla versus Superman comic, but for a lot of these kind of arguments, like, those two characters have never met, so we can just argue about it.
And that result will be changed in the next comic as well, I'm sure.
In the next comic anyway, because then the other side needs to win to keep their fans happy. Exactly. But there's a certain element of like right and wrongness in that, like, if it's something more like, where there's not comics, there's so many millions of spin-offs and rewrites and restarts and all in alternate universes. But for something more simple, like, say, Star Wars or Star Trek, where something either happened or it didn't. Like, Luke Skywalker has got a green lightsaber now. He does. Yeah, you can't really argue with that, even if you're red-green colorblind. That's pretty much like just the answer. Whereas so much of what we do is not necessarily uncertain, or at least not necessarily as fickle as people think it is. But obviously, when we're talking about things like feathers, it's like, well, exactly how feathered were they? We don't really know. Exactly how big were these feathers? Well, we don't really know. We have a lot of estimates or uncertainty. So there is no clear right and wrong that you can point to. Is that, again, sort of the problem is that you've got people arguing who don't kind of almost have any facts, because there isn't. Well, there are facts in science, but feathers or not in T-Rex, there are arguments for and there's arguments against. And that's basically all there is, because there is no single definitive one true answer until we get, the most perfect Archaeopteryx level preservation where we've got everything. It's all about probabilities or best guesses or consensus.
I think it's interesting you say it like that, because I think you mentioned like Luke Skywalker had the green lightsaber, right? Luke Skywalker ultimately is made up. I'm sorry, he's not real. But
what?
Interesting thing.
What? Hang on.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Darth Vader, just a guy in a suit. What? Yeah.
Well, about
that guy
three
was faking,
people, actually.
Yeah. That guy was fake and being choked. He just wanted out of the office. But I was thinking, as you saying that, like, when you actually look at this, though, we talk about the fandom element, but actually I think the science element contributes to that as well, because they were real. And whatever we'd learn, Tyrannosaurs did or didn't have feathers. That is a reality. there is there 67 million years ago, there was a Tyrannosaurus Rex wandering around, and it was either bald as an egg, or it had feathers, or it was covered in feathers, or whatever. But when you have the fandom mentality combined with, no, this is reality, like there is a truth to this, and you don't have that scientific and academic literacy to be aware of just how science evolves and transitions and everything else, you can have a thing like, hang on, you're contradicting reality. You're saying this isn't real, but it's real. It was literally there. And when you bring that in as well, like I was just thinking, like we had a paper I was with I'm Irish and I can never say it. Diarc, because we'd say Diarc here, but the Scottish say Yark.
Scottish.
So, like,
I believe it's Yark. Yeah, so we've mentioned Yark. We've had Natalia on.
Natalia
to talk about it.
Yeah, I was one of Natalia's supervisors, and the last part of her
and
PhD
this was a pterosaur, wasn't it?
I was going
to say that.
Yeah,
yes.
Flappydactyl, yeah. He's actually dying. It's so good.
I know. We can see Dave's face. You cannot, and it's wonderful.
Yeah, but we brought a new paper, and it mentions the family Angusturina riptorini, and it sort of talks about their placement in the phylogeny. And like Dave had a paper come out very recently that actually said like Yark is actually way more transitional than we assumed, and it's phenomenal. I love it. I love it. Like within a couple of years of this animal being discovered, it's already had like a major change to its taxonomy, and it's actually taken on a more important role by having this major change to its taxonomy. And I find that brilliant. But a couple of years ago, it was absolutely a big Rhamphorhynchine, and that's all it was. And now a big Rhamphorhynchine pterosaur, and now it's something else. And it went from like what was in the mind of some people 100% true is now 100% wrong. And like, if you're trying to keep up with the science,
assuming our paper's right,
but like,
again, the part of the issue is, mine's the latest paper, but I wouldn't, and I think we did a good job. I think we're right, but
I like it. It was a good paper.
New data set, new characters. It can move.
Yeah, but like but for the people reading it, like who aren't in the academia, it's like, oh, this is it. Wait, no, you published something else that says this was it. So now you have like now you have camps of like true. You have pterosaur truthers. For one thing, like this is real. Now this is real. Now this is a very minor thing that no one's getting into a fight over. But what classic thing? Could they fly or could they glide? There were camps about in the 90s. There were normal everyday people who were into the very like pre-internet paleo fandom who would have conversations about this and get quite heated. I was one of them. Let's go with the big classic: T-Rex is a scavenger, T-Rex is a hunter. When reality is far more complex than that. Look at lions. But they're like, people are so passionate about this. And like, I think the fact that reality is actually part of this basically takes what Dave was saying and amplifies it. Because they know there is a truth to this. There actually is an answer to this, and I can be the right one. I can be the one who's right.
So I guess the question I have, because we are drifting towards the end, is what kind of, if anything, should we try and do about this? Because certainly I have tried in the past at least a little bit to engage with this side of things. And I found it somewhere between difficult and frustrating and outright. But basically, I was occasionally active on Reddit. And I basically left Reddit because of the response I got over something like this. So there was a thread. There was the eternal thread of the Thagomizer. For those who don't know, I suspect everyone knows. So there's this classic Gary Larson cartoon about this joke about the tail spikes on Stegosaurus being called a Thagomizer because it killed some caveman called Thag. Obviously madness because caveman, etc. And this has been used truly a couple of times, like literally 2 or 3 times ever in a couple of scientific papers. I think Ken Carpenter was the only person who ever used them. But that's it. Like, it's been used 2 or 3 times ever, like back in the 90s. And all other stegosaur and dinosaur researchers don't use it. I know some are actively against it because they think it trivializes science, etc., etc. But there was yet another thread, because this is one of those things that someone hears it for the first time and then shares it for everyone who's heard it 1,000 times, going, Thagomizer is the official, and that's the key word, official term used for this thing. And I made the mistake of responding and going, no, it isn't, because there's no such thing as an official term. There is no list of terms that paleontologists or scientists do and don't use. There's a couple which are, there are obviously some that are so standard it'd be weird if you didn't, like humerus or tooth or skull. But even there are options. We use anterior versus cranial for directions. Some people will, particularly if they're not writing in English, will refer to, just a dentition and not actually use the word teeth, and things like this. So I was saying, there's no official list. It just doesn't exist. You can claim it if you want, but the idea that there's a piece of paper somewhere with them all written down on isn't true. And I got shouted at and downvoted to oblivion for pointing out the truth about something, which I could verify by showing the papers and showing links to other people talking about this stuff. Again, that exact point of the evidence, I think I think that is a problem of being a scientist, is look, you made an argument and you do not have any evidence to support your argument. And I have a different argument, and here's my experience, and here's my evidence.
That's
so
bullying.
You're obviously incorrect, and you will now see me as correct, and that's really nice and easy. And then as I say, I was so frustrated. That's when I basically left. Is if the people who claim to be real fans and into the science and want to learn about this stuff will hound one of the handful of actual professional paleontologists giving up their time to interact with them off the site, you're not getting me. And that's the thing, because however lovely our fan base is, hello, lovely fan base.
Yeah, our fan base is good.
Yeah, but we know we have them. And however good and engaged and fun they are, and people message me and people come up to me at conferences and meetings and interact on Blue Sky and stuff like this, and it's mostly very positive, and even the negative stuff is usually just someone asking me about T-Rex scavenging again. It's please, I've written a book, I've recorded several episodes, stop sending me 4-page long emails asking me my opinion about something I've dated 1,000 times. But while it's all very, very positive, I think it's probably fair to say that wider fandom, even though the bit we're talking about mostly in this episode is actually quite a minority, but that wider fandom is probably 10 or 100 times bigger. There are far, far, far more people who think dinosaurs are cool because they saw Jurassic Park and have read a couple of comics than there are people who are subscribers to Terrible Lizards, for example. Or
that would be a truth.
Yeah, or watching Prehistoric Planet and then going on a forum and chatting about I think that bit was based on this paper. And yeah, I think that bit's based on that drawing Mark Whitten did and stuff like this. And so as someone who's very interested in public understanding of science, public education, encouraging people to engage in dinosaurs and science and research and why it's all cool, the fact that I'm actively ignoring the vast majority of the audience, I find problematic. On the other hand, if they're actively hostile towards me, I think there should be some sympathy for why I'm not doing that. But there's the paradox. What on earth could we do or should we do?
I'm just trying to say, how do you fix fandom? I have a real interest in doing a research paper in paleo fandom that I have been planning for years, and real life keeps getting in the way. I mean, I'm working a paper with Dave at the moment, and I have been saying every couple of weeks, I've got my time to do it now. Actually, no, I have to go correct 10 papers. And I'm writing a book at the moment, and it's just you got a million different things eating up your time. How do you take the time to fix a cultural movement? Because that's what fandom is. It's a whole separate unit. There are norms and standards of practices that do not exist in any culture outside these communities. And I'd also say, before I go, we've been very much leaning on the negative side of fandom here. We also have to realize that a lot of us would not be in this if it wasn't for fandom. If it wasn't for...
So it is still a gateway towards the more positive stuff we're talking about.
Someone said, I remember saying, when Jurassic World came out, oh my God, can you imagine if anyone gets into paleontology because of this movie? And oh my God, because Jurassic World is not the most accurate movie in 2015, it therefore will produce the world's worst paleontologist. Or it'll do what 1993 did and lead to a revolution in the science, because we'll actually have a ton of people all come in at once who are all just oh, actually, no, this movie was wrong, but I still love it. But this movie was wrong. I love Jurassic Park, my favorite movie. I watch it every Christmas. It was very wrong about a lot of stuff. I wish some of it was true. I wish Dilophosaurus was basically a turret that shot people, but...
I'm just going to have to interject briefly, Mike. it's not really a Christmas movie, is it?
Love Actually and Jurassic Park are my Christmas movies.
Okay, people argue about Die Hard and Gremlins, but I don't remember Grant wearing a Christmas jumper.
It'd be improved if it were a Christmas movie. It'd be so much better because it's about a family coming together. It's about a man, looking after his...
It's got Santa in it. Santa's one of the main characters.
What did you do? Miracle in 54th Street?
Miracle 34th Street, yeah.
I think if Newman was, instead of wearing a Hawaiian shirt, was wearing some sort of like Christmas jumper, I think that would only make it better, surely.
Yeah.
Oh, somebody with clever AI technologies, just remake it. Put the jingle bells that they use in Die Hard all over it. Can you imagine, like, a velociraptor taking somebody, like, kidnapping them, and then their dead corpse there, just their skeleton that they picked off all the flesh, and it just says, and now I've had lunch, ho, ho, ho. That'd be brilliant.
Or I just have ended like dead bodies left on piles of coal. They were naughty children.
That's nice.
But like I think like basically you have to break your way through the first generation, which is moving on to like the negative side and how to get the negative side communicate and how to get people talking to the positive side. I think you have to basically have some frontline soldiers who are going to take a lot of hits, who are really working to engage and communicate and find the parts of this fandom that are like, oh, I really want to learn. I don't know this stuff, but I want to learn. Or I don't agree with it, but I'm open and I'm friendly and I'm chatty. Like, I think I used to do a lot of outreach, and I think outreach is so important for this kind of stuff. And as professionals doing outreach especially. And I think you would need, like, to make a real, like, I want to see a fandom, like a 5-year fandom generational shift. You would need a concentrated effort from a lot of people who are willing to just sit there and entrench themselves, because when they're there, the new generation of fans will be moving in. Fandoms tend to have a 5 to 10 year lifespan for membership. Some people go longer, some people go shorter, but you're looking at about 5 to 10 years. The older ones age out because they get married, or they run out of money, or they move on to a different fandom or whatever. And then new people come, and by the way, married because your partner goes, I don't want this in my house, get it out of my house. But
where my collection?
Yeah.
Happily, Mike, I met your partner at TetZooCon, and I suspect the opposite is true, which is you now have too much tat.
Yes, we have so much. And then new people move in, and when those new people move in, they learn the norms and the culture, and you have now
from the people who are there,
and you're established. You've set up a community that's now more open and conversational and educational, and also more respectful, because I can come in and say, like, I don't really want to learn about this in depth. I'm just really interested to hear. And I can do that without being rude. Or you can learn how to say, I disagree, without saying, by the way, you're a bad person. Like, but you're talking about a concept, like, just how many years ago was it Gamergate came out? And I'm still, I was looking for different paleo themed Reddits for promo reasons. And I just saw, like, there's an official Gamersgate community still. I just like, what the hell are they still doing there? But the psychology that led to that nonsense movement is also the psychology that influences a lot of people's strong opinions.
Every one of the others,
So you've got to set up, it would have to be a protracted effort to set up a healthier environment with healthier communication. And I think it can be done, but I don't think paleontologists or scientists in general are that organized. But I would like to see it, but I try and be friendly to everyone whenever, on the rare occasions people come to me for my opinion this, so I try to be very friendly and chat. Like I get DMs sometimes from, like, especially people in like fandoms that I've been in who are also interested in paleontology, and they'll reach out to me and say, like, can you explain this? Apparently this is weird. I found this out a couple of weeks back. Like, I came up at the Transformers 1 premiere because I did a presentation at a Transformers conference a couple of years ago on how to fix the Dinobots, because I don't like their designs because they keep making them really retro, and I think they could make them better. I'm a nerd, I know.
No. Yeah, I wouldn't hear a word against you.
But yeah, I think it's just like, there would have, like, if you want to see like a big change, it's like there needs to be like a group of people who are assigned the role of being the paleo fandom engagement officers. And I don't think anyone's volunteering for that job anytime soon. But yeah, it's incredibly difficult. I think you're trying to solve a problem that's been in the world for years. and now it's hitting our little sphere.
But yeah, I guess the last thing just to sum up is going back to that central point. So I've talked many times about how paleontology and then a little bit astronomy and then a little bit maths are the kind of fields of real science where there is real, advances and contributions being made from a lot of amateurs. But it goes back to that thing you were saying, right? There's a bit of zoology in this, but it's going to be quite limited in comparison. This is a unique problem. Like even in my, I'm in a biology department. I'm not in a paleo or earth sciences department. Like people are fascinated and horrified that like this could exist. My friends publishing papers on plant genetics or starfish development or whatever else, like there aren't websites devoted to arguing about, well, you should use that gene, and why didn't they use that model organism, and clearly don't understand chlorophyll pathways. And because I'm perhaps more engaged than a lot of people are, and then I am doing stuff like Tyrannosaurs and Spinosaurs, which really makes it worse. But like,
don't get started on Spinosaurs.
Well, I know.
Spinosaurs. If I see one more meme about Spinosaurs, yeah, I swear to God.
Right, but there are pages and pages of discussion, if you look, just devoted to arguing about bits of my papers, and indeed anyone else on this stuff. And there's the real point being, like, this isn't a problem that the rest of science faces, and therefore they probably don't even know it exists. And so that again makes it a little bit harder when, certainly, again, going back to the last episode that hopefully people have listened to, and if not, please to listen to it because it is really relevant for this. Like when I'm trying to justify myself to my academic colleagues as someone doing like good work as an outreach and engagement person, I have an audience for my stuff that a lot of them probably don't have. Sadly, I don't think there are lots of pages devoted to plant genetics or genomics in, on Reddit or Carnivora Forum or whatever place you might see. But on the other hand, if they did, they're probably not that, aggressive or potentially difficult to deal with for some things. And so it is unusual in that regard anyway, but also again, makes it that there is a bigger problem of, as you say, like how would I go to a funding body and get them to understand that actually this is a problem and an issue and something that maybe we could fix and could improve the whole of science? Because imagine if, as you say, you could flip that around a little and we run from 100,000 or 1 million people who are kind of into dinosaurs, but quite a lot of them are a bit meh about how they do it, to a super positive, super engaged, supportive community. Wouldn't that be wonderful for science as a whole? Because, of course, as we've said, and is also true, dinosaurs are absolutely a gateway science drug in that context. There are lots and lots of people who are into science when they're young, they're into dinosaurs when they're young, who go into being into science because it gets them interested. But yeah, when no one even knows it exists.
Well, Mike, I mean, you didn't really get the last word there. Dave did, but that's kind of normal with this podcast, to be fair.
Yay!
Dave getting the last word. There's a shock.
But what we'll do, see, we're going to go away now. And when we do, we're going to make him... What do you call... I call them flappy flaps. You call them flappy...
Flappy dactyls.
Flappy dactyls.
I'm getting a t-shirt.
So we're all going to make the noise
I need
of
a t-shirt
flappy dactyl in order to say goodbye, because this is what we do, because we refuse to... Because while I think science is important, you should adapt your mind palace to whatever you wish. We will have one thing, which is we will still think that dinosaurs is fun. What is it, Dave?
I wasn't supposed to have the last word because Mike was going to be allowed to plug paleo games. So I'm not getting the last word. I'm finishing the discussion so we can hand over. So to both of you.
Please go ahead, Mike, and plug away all the things.
As I slowly salute Dave and his moral high ground. If anyone's interested, I wrote a book called I co-wrote a book with Nathan Barling, Dr. Jolin's Dictionary of Dinosaurs. It is the nerdiest thing you can write, which is a D&D dinosaur crossover, which is intended to be very scientifically accurate. We wrote about 60 species. We did lots of research. We built up environments. We did plants. We also did tons of like weird D&D stuff, like our Tyrannosaurus has a psychic roar, because why not? And when Big Al walks by, it plays the Walking with Dinosaurs music, because why not?
Amazing.
And yeah, so we did that in Kickstarter a few years ago. It did really, really well. If you're interested in a copy of it, it's up there on paleogames.com. We're currently working on the sequel, Professor Primula's Portfolio Paleontology. I didn't name it. So that's going to have at least as many dinosaurs again. We're currently up to... We're definitely going to have at least 40. We've planned up way more than that. The Kickstarter preview page is up now, so if you want to follow that, it's up there in Kickstarter. And then there's a link to our Discord in there as well, and you can join and see a few previews of what's going to be coming up for like game mechanics and races, and also like what animals we haven't revealed. And it's got a lot more than dinosaurs this time, so it's going to have prehistoric mammals, gastropods, birds, more flappydactyls. I'm never going to stop now. And yeah, more dinosaurs. But we've gotten it. We generally aim to have stuff people haven't heard of. So we've got dinosaurs that we've got like beryllium, an ornithopod that I'm not that up on ornithopods. I hadn't actually that familiar about it, and I had to learn about it to write it, which was brilliant fun, which is one of the things I love about this project.
I want a Jurassic Volaticotherium expansion. I'm just saying that now.
So you can get, so one of these you probably know, the others you might not. So obviously you'll get at least a immediate validation from me, because I think I was listed as like consultant editor on the first book.
Yeah.
And I know Nathan has already capped me up to do it again. But what you may not know is someone close to us, her other half bought it.
Oh God,
Dr. Drolin. So you
I hope they enjoyed
all three
it.
of us will own copies of the first book.
Paleogames.com, Kickstarter. Keep an eye on us. I think it's good. I like it.
We'll put the link up so people will be able to
definitely.
Find it.
And it'll also be in the show notes.
Thank you very much for that, Mike.
So now we can flappy dactyl us, can't we? We can flappy dactyl goodbye. Please, Dave. Flappy dactyl.
I know you're going to whether I say yes or no. So
I know exactly. I don't really understand consent when it comes to squawking. So, Mike, after 3, we're going to say goodbye to all our listeners by making the noise of a flappy dactyl. After 3, 1, 2, 3. Thank you for listening to this episode of Terrible Lizards, and thanks as well for going to that social media you never seem to update and sharing the podcast there too. You could also go to patreon.com/Terrible Lizards to support the show and access a wealth of extra content. Get in touch with us via terriblelizardspod@gmail.com, and while you're here, do check out Dave and Izzy's books. Flappy bye-bye.